Welcome to the Save the Frogs webinar series. I am Dr. Carrie Krieger, founder of Save the Frogs, and very happy to be here with Dr. Pedro Peloso. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. Pedro is in Belém in the Amazon, northeastern Brazil, and he has extensive experience with Brazilian amphibians and also Southeast Asia. He's spent some time at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., described many amphibian species and take some incredible amphibian photos. So he is here to talk to us about how photography can be used to promote science communication and the conservation of biodiversity. Pedro, thanks for being here. I'm going to let you take charge. Feel free to tell us about yourself, and it's all you for at least a half an hour.
Cool. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's a great pleasure and honor to be giving this talk to Save the Frogs. And I'll just go right into it and we can chat about it later, about my background and science stuff. This is going to be very informal. It's lots of pictures of frogs and a little bit of what I do. So I'll start with a small story of how I got started into herpetology and conservation. So this is a photograph I took 12 or 13 years ago. I was still an undergrad student. It's not the greatest picture on Earth, but it's pretty important. At the time, I didn't know what it was. So I collected this frog and showed my advisor. And it turned out this was an unnamed species that I found as an undergrad. So this is how I got into taxonomy and systematics and stuff like that. But the picture is even more important because after I discovered these species, we've been looking for it in other sites for about 12 years now, and we have not found this species anywhere else. So this species is only found in that same locality where I discovered it 13 years ago. So the area where it occurs is like only 4 times larger than Central Park, for those of you familiar with New York. And the species was listed as critically endangered with extinction. So this might be one of the very last pictures of these species. And this has bugged me for a while. So I'm more and more interested in conservation. And I think this is very appropriate for Save the Frogs. So this is a photograph I took as an undergrad. I had no pretensions for this picture, but now I use it in all my talks because it's very important for me and for my work. My passion for photography is about as old as my passion for biology. I started photographing stuff when I was an undergrad, going to like family houses and the background of the university. And of course, my photograph has gotten a little bit better with time, but I still use a lot of photographs from back then. So this photograph is 12 years old. And it turns out this is also an unnamed species. I didn't know that at the time, but it's being named as a new species now by some colleagues. And I now do a lot of close-ups. And I'm gonna share my Instagram account, and you can see a lot of photos there as well. This is a Amazonian osteocephalus with a beautiful eye. This is a Philomedusa, one of the most beautiful frogs we have here in South America.
Hey,
and now I go to the field, yeah.
If you know and I'm sure you do know the full species name, feel free to give the full species name because people are probably interested in knowing.
Cool, yeah. And if people like pop up questions on the chat, you feel free to interrupt me and I'll answer them. So let's.
Okay, we did get a question. It looked like a little toad that inspired you. The very first one. What is the name, if it now has a name?
That's Melanophreniniscus setiba. It's a buffonid. It's the sister taxa to all other buffonids, and it's a very tiny toad. So yeah, so now I go to the field. I always have my camera on me, and I try to like get frogs in different behaviors and curious positions. So this is a cassia-headed frog, Aparas phenodon brunoi, very common in the southeastern Brazil. and I try to do portraits, a lot of portraits. So I do like good lighting. So I bring a lot of lighting to the field, black backgrounds and stuff like that. And then at the end of the day, what I want to show people when I share a lot of these cute frog pictures is something like that. So we all know that we're losing habitat pretty quickly, and this is huge for frogs, because frogs need water, frogs need the forest, and some of them live in the forest and they go into water. So if we clear out some land, they can't reach the breeding site anymore. So everything that I do is so I can once in a while pop out and show you some pictures like this of deforestation for closing of forests, for clearing out of forests for pasture. And I also photograph other animals, not only frogs. I'm very interested in lizards. I actually started out with lizard biology and ecology. So this is a lizard from South America, Enialius perditus. This is an anole, the blue-white anole, Anolis transversalis from Amazonia. So again, try to show the animals in their habitat. And now I really try to photograph lots of animals, especially if I have a chance to photograph an animal, even if it's a closed setting. So this photo was taken at the Smithsonian Zoo. So I had a lot of time to prepare and take this photo and of the lone wolf. This is also in a zoo. So what I try to do is get animals and show portraits so people can care about the animals, so that at the end of the day, I can again show pictures that are really relevant, and then people can pay attention. Because if I only show a sequence of pictures of deforestation, of cleared forests, people lose attention. They don't pay attention to these anymore. So if you show a lot of frogs, cute animals, and then one picture like this. So this is a lot of mining, clearing of Amazonian forests for mining, for illegal gold mining. So if I show a picture like this after a lot of cool frog pictures, then people start to think about it in a more serious way about conservation of frogs. So Carrie said, I discovered a lot of species. So this is part of my more scientific work. Some of these pictures are very old. So this is Chiasmoclase avilapitidae, which I named in honor of my master's advisor, Teresa Avilapidis. This is another frog I discovered in Amazonia. This frog got a lot of media attention. It was named after Ozzy Osbourne. I'm one of the co-authors in this study. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. It's a very tiny frog. This is probably the most beautiful frog I've discovered. So this is Dendropsophos mapinguari. Mapinguari is a legendary creature from Amazonia, and I named it after that. This is one of my favorite frogs ever. I think it's really beautiful. And it actually made the cover of South American Journal of Herpetology. So this is where I unite my passion for biology and herpetology and photography. And my photographic work with frogs made the cover of other herpetological journals and other journals as well. Some mammal pictures got the cover. These are 3 of the cover photos with different frog species, all of them from Amazonia. This is sort of how I got more popular, and my voice is being amplified now because I have some outlets that are sharing my work, like Carrie, let me use Save the Frogs Now, and National Geographic have been sharing my work quite a lot. So these are 3 short stories they made about my discovery. So the first one is about, of course, the Ozzy Osbourne frog that was pretty big in the news. And then the Mapinguari, the other one, the yellow one that I showed, and then another story they did earlier this year. And the photographic editors at Nat Geo are also paying a little bit of attention to my photo work. So this is a water snake that I photographed last year, and they published this on their website. So I'm just going to share a few pictures that Nat Geo liked and published within their many outlets. A pair of cute squirrels there. I took in my dad's backyard. I had a lot of time to wait for them. I was just sitting there and they were doing lots of different things. So I just had some time to get this shot off. The snowy owl. And then this is again more of my photographer in me talking here. So I really wanted to see this animal. So when I was in DC, I traveled to upstate New York where I knew like they had a high concentration of snowy owls, and I traveled for like 6 hours in a car, and I was out there in the snow just to get like some pictures of this animal. So this is like the photographer talking more than the herpetologist. And then frogs, they also like the frog shots. So now I have shown a little bit of my science work and my photographic work, and this is how National Geographic put me into a position to talk about science to more people. Because if I only publish in herpetological journals, scientific journals, people will listen to it, but not a lot of people. So if I use an outlet like National Geographic or even local magazines and stuff like that, a lot more people will start to pay attention. So I got a couple scientific grants from Nat Geo, and now I know a lot of the editors there. I know a lot of people that are interested in sharing some of my stories. And I published 2 full stories with Nat Geo, one about reptiles, so cobras and lagartos there, it's snakes and lizards from Brazil. And then I did another story on Brazilian salamanders, because I don't know where the crowd is from there, but in the US and Europe, we have a lot of salamanders, but in Brazil, we only have 5 salamanders. And one of them is endangered with extinction. And for the 4 others were just recently discovered, and they're data deficient, basically. We don't know their conservation status. So I don't need to talk a lot about this because most of us are familiar with frog diversity. We all know that South America, and especially Amazonia there in northern South America, and the other red region down there, the Atlantic rainforest, are hotspots for amphibian diversity. So I'm very privileged to be in Brazil, where we have a lot of diversity. 1/8 of the diversity of amphibians is in Brazil. Like 1 in every 8 species is found here. And I'm lucky enough to be able to go out there and see and photograph some of these incredible animals. So just a little bit about hotspots is where we have a lot of diversity and also a lot of threats to this diversity. And we have 2 hotspots in Brazil, which is the Cerrado and the Atlantic forest. So lots of endemics and lots of threatened species. And I also have been to the Cerrado, and I do a lot of work in the Atlantic forest. So I'm in contact with a lot of endangered species and rare species too. So this is what I like to share with people, and I'm sharing with you now some of these photos. In spite of being one of the most diverse regions in the world regarding amphibians, South America is still a good place to find new species. So nearly 150 new species of amphibian is found everywhere in the world on average per year. And a lot of this diversity is still being found in Brazil. And just as an example, I showed some of the species I've discovered, and these are 3 species that I've discovered in the last couple of years, and they're still unnamed. We're still working to name these. So they're all from Amazonia. So for the last 10 years or so, I've been working mostly in Amazonia. So this is a tiny Dendropistophos that is still unnamed. This is a small Boana, the gladiator frogs. This is also unnamed. And this is a related species that is also unnamed that I found in Amazonia in 2017, I guess, a couple of years ago. So these are all species that are still being named. So you get an idea that we are losing diversity very fast, and we have more species to name that we can work on. Actually, we have a lot of material in museums, in the American museums, and in the South American museums, and we don't we can't work with all of them at the same time. So we're working on it slowly, but we have a lot to do still. These are some numbers from YUCN, the International Union for Conservation. And as you'll see, there's a lot of, these are all threatened animals. And by the numbers, you can see that amphibians are high up in there. So 4 in every 10 amphibian species is threatened with extinction in some level. So this is the higher of any group of animals that they've evaluated there. So birds, we talk a lot about birds and sharks and corals, but amphibians are more endangered than any of those groups of creatures. So amphibians are in a very, very bad situation right now. I'm going to talk about categories in the future a little bit. So these are the threat categories that YUCN deals with. So extinct in the wild, critically endangered, and vulnerable. These are species that are considered to be threatened. So if you go back to those numbers, so 41 species of amphibians are in one of these categories. And then you have the near threatened, the least concerned, and for me, what is the most important category of all, the data deficient category. So a lot of the species are in this category. They're data deficient, which means that we do not have enough information to even assess what their conservation status is. So many of them are only known from a single locality or just a few specimens. And these are the ones we need to focus. But counterintuitively, most of the funding goes to threatened species and not for the data deficient species. It's very hard to get specific conservation grants to study data deficient species. So a little bit about amphibians. So we have over 2,000 species that are threatened and 34 that are considered extinct already. The problem is not all the species have been evaluated. Over 1,000 species have never been evaluated by YUCN, and about 75% have been evaluated over 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago. So a lot of these data is really outdated. We need to redo all that. I think YUCN is trying to bring this up to date, but the data we have for conservation is not very up to date to this point. And here are a few examples of amphibians that are extinct. This is the most common and textbook example of extinct species. This is a golden toad from Panama or Costa Rica. I can't remember exactly. I think it's Panama.
Costa Rica,
actually. Costa Rica, yeah.
Monteverde.
Yeah, so this is one of the first very well documented cases of amphibian extinctions in the world. This is another one. This is the gastric brooding frog. It has a unique behavior. They raise their tadpoles and in their stomach, and it's a single genus with 2 species. They're also extinct, and they're modern extinctions. They're caused by us, by human beings, because we have photos of them. They're recent extinctions. And this is the only Brazilian species that is currently officially listed as extinct, although we have other species that are critically endangered but have not been seen in over 40 years, and they may be already extinct as well. This is Phrenomedusa marginata. It's a species from São Paulo. This has not been seen in over 100 years. People have searched for it, and it's extinct, and we have no photos of this species alive at all, which is a shame. A little bit about the threats to these species. So we all know about deforestation and pollution and stuff like that. But for those of you that are not familiar with amphibian biology, there's a fungus that's killing a lot of amphibians worldwide. Some of the declines and extinctions are well documented to be caused by this fungus. So it's the chytrid fungus, Batrachochytrium dendropatidis. So I'm not going to go into the details of the cycle, but this fungus affects frog populations worldwide, and a lot of them are extinct because of the fungus, probably. The biology of the fungus is getting very well known. There are many groups of people working with the disease ecology of this particular disease. And some textbooks, this is proved that the widely used vertebrate zoology book. So they talk a little bit about when the fungus appeared in Central America, and here they talk about when the fungus appeared in South America. So about the estimates were late 70s and early 2000. It was already widespread, at least in the Andean location. So the textbook here does not talk about Brazil at all. But the fact of the matter is, we have very old records of chytrid fungus in Brazil. So the first published record was in 2006, a study by Luis Felipe Toledo, which is a biologist in the Universidade de Campinas, and he's one of the leading authorities in the study of the fungus. And after that, we found that the fungus is actually widespread in Brazil, lots of localities, Atlantic forest, Amazonian. So if you look at the red regions there, this is where there's the highest risk of Batrachochytrium dendrobatidis infections. I want you to take a look at this picture, because I'm going to show it again later, and it's really important because you're going to correlate where all of the endangered species in Brazil are, and it's going to be right on top of this huge red mass in southeastern Brazil right there. So there's a recent study that showed the intensity of threat. So they talk about climate change. We all heard about climate change, although some people deny it. I think it's a real thing, and it's really important that we talk about it. So the chytrid fungus, it seems to not be a problem in Amazonia so far, but it is a problem in southeastern Brazil. And habitat loss. But what can we do to help? What should we be doing that we're not doing? So I think there are three aspects that are really important for us to understand if we're going to talk about amphibian conservation and biological conservation in general. So the first thing we need is legislation. We need to protect these species by law in some way. We need a lot more research. We need to understand the threats. We need to understand the animal's biology. We need to understand what are the risks. We need to make predictions to the future, and we need education, because if we do research and we have legislation but we have no education, nothing is going to change. So legislation, two things are important: protection to the species. We have the red lists, in addition to the international widely used IUCN list that I commented before. We have local lists. So in Brazil, we have a red list of amphibians with 42 species. We need protection to the habitat. But this is a picture I took last year, and protection to the habitat often fails. So this should be a protected area in Brazil, but you can see half of it is already cleared, and the river there is all destroyed by illegal gold mining. So although we have the laws there, if they're not enforced, they're not any good. We need research so we can understand what to protect. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but we need to protect endemic species. We need to protect areas with more diversity. We need to protect unique genetic lineages, all sorts of things. We need to have priorities, and the only way to understand these priorities is through research. And then education, and then I'll come back to my photos again. This is that's probably the end of all the scientific no photo part of the talk. So this is photos again. And we need to have education from a very early age. So this is a kid showing me the diversity of butterflies around his house, because I was photographing one butterfly, and all of a sudden he came back with a bunch of other different butterflies. And I took this picture of him. He became my friend. I was around his house for a couple of days working with his dad, who was helping us with a study with amphibians in Brazil. and it's got to be continuous. You can't just educate the kids and then let it go. So this is a biologist friend of mine. So she's well educated in conservation and biodiversity, but she was terrified of snakes. So this is probably the first time she ever held a snake in her hand, and she was frightened at the beginning, but I convinced her that this is not a dangerous snake, and she looks in love with the snake right there. And this is the first time she ever came near a snake. This is my daughter Leah holding some tortoises there and a frog. So I try to go out as much as I can with my kid and avoid TV and just go to the parks, and we go see monkeys, we go see sloths and frogs and stuff like that. And I think this is one particular aspect that we're missing quite a lot these days. We need to reconnect with nature, and I think the best way to do that is through the younger generation. And then the intersection between these three things, so legislation, research, and education, I think that's where I think science communication plays a big role. And there are many, many ways to do it. The way I found to be effective for me is through conservation photography. I like photography a lot. I do research, and I think by combining my photography and putting some conservation messages into it, I think we can really impact legislation at some point. I'm not preaching that every science should do this, but I think scientists need to communicate more with people. Either they do it or they find somebody else to tell their stories. But our research needs to be out there in a palatable way, because people are not going to read scientific papers. They need stories, they need images, they need something that they can relate to. So I had this idea in mind for 3 or 4 years, and how I could do more about conservation. So this is another photo of that tiny frog I discovered when I was an undergrad. And I've been going through my photos again when I was a postdoc 2 years ago in DC, and I organized all my database. So this is Megalosia apuana. It is a very rare frog, and it's affected by the fungus. It's dying in many places, and I have this photo from 2006. And going through my photos, I saw, well, I have a lot of photos of amphibians that are endangered with extinction that people consider rare, and many important biologists, herpetologists have never seen. And what can I do with these photos? So this is the salamander here that I told you that's endangered with extinction. I have an old picture of it, and I said, oh, I have a lot of pictures of endangered species. What can I do with these pictures? How can I tell them their story to people? And then I wrote a small grant to Idea Wild to go out and photograph endangered species and endemic species around the city of Belém. This was 3 years ago. And I used this money to go and photograph this unnamed species of Adenomera. And that on that same trip, Pablo was there. I think he was here at the beginning of the talk. I don't know if he's still there. He was in this trip, and we said, well, there's an endangered species nearby where the species are. Do you want to go there and try to see if we can find it? So we traveled an extra four hours and went out there and tried to photograph this species, which is highly endangered with extinction. It's very endemic from a mountaintop here in southern Pará. I said, wow, this is kind of cool. So I did this for the snowy owl. I travel a lot just to go there and get the image, and I shared, and NetGeo liked it. A lot of people liked it. I said, well, I think we can do that. I think people will actually like to see more images of these endangered species. And then I came out with this idea. What if I could document all Brazilian amphibian species threatened with extinction? I think it's a crazy idea. It's a lot of species. Brazil is huge, and we have 42 species. These are where they're distributed, one extinct, a lot of them critically endangered, a lot of them highly endangered, and some vulnerable. And if you know Brazil is huge. And then I started out thinking about my project to photograph all of them. So I plotted all the dots there, and you can see they're pretty widespread. So I would have to travel a lot to go and try to find these species and photograph them. And it was not going to be easy. Some of them are missing for a long time. I've never had experience with many of these. And this idea remained dormant in my head for a couple of years. And then, yeah, so before I go through, so if you look at where the dots for endangered species are in the map on your left, and then you look at the map on your right, you can see that a lot of the endangered species, the reds and the oranges, are highly threatened, and you overlap this with where the chytrid fungus is. There's a high overlap, so we can't say it's a correlation, but we actually think that the fungus might be related with a lot of these threats and possible extinctions and population declines. And then I had this idea, but I had no time and I couldn't do this alone. And then talking to some people, I talked to Iberê about this crazy idea I had, and he said, well, let's do it. We can do it. I said, no, we can't. We don't have any money. We're not going to be able to travel all of Brazil searching for the species. And I said, no, let's do it. I'll help you. And then he contacted a bunch of people that had contact with the species, and he knows people in the government with ICMBio, which is the regulatory organ here. And he said, well, let's do it. But we still didn't have any money. And then I contacted Guilherme Becker from, he's also a Brazilian. He's now in the University of Alabama, and he's one of the leading authorities for the study of the chytrid fungus. And he said, well, your idea is good, and I know how we're going to find money for you to go after these species. Let's try to find chytrid fungus in all of these endangered species and in their environment. So he set up a plan. We wrote a project, and there you go. And then Wab was going to fund the project for photographing and for documenting all these species. So the photographer part of me and the science communication part of me, what was going to fund all this was research, and research about the fungus and the likelihood and the link between the fungus and the extinctions in Brazil. So we wrote a small grant to the Fresno Zoo in the United States. They have a wildlife conservation fund, and they gave us a small amount of money to go and find these species. So we concentrated, and okay, we're not going to be able to find all the species and do all the travel with this money that they gave us. So what can we do? So we selected this area in red there, where the most species are, and we so here's a zoom and where all the species are distributed. And then we set up 2 expeditions. So the criteria was, we want to find the highest amount of species with the highest level of threat in the least amount of time. So that's what we wanted to do. So we did 2 expeditions. Each was 6 or 7 days, and we wanted to find 4 or 5 species in each of this expedition. So we had pretty much 1 night per species. And these are some of the photos that we collected. So this is the project I'm working right now. It's documenting all of the amphibians threatened with extinction. So this is a few photos. I'll come back with the names. These are some photos that we're taking of species. Some of these species have very bad photographs available. Some of these species, people don't even know about it. Some of them, we're making videos for the first time. We're collecting high quality pictures of it, lots and lots and lots of pictures of many of these threatened species. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of them so you know a little bit more about what we're doing. So our project is called Documenting Threatened Species, DOTS. The official release of the project is probably going to be February 12th, but I'm sharing this with you firsthand. This is the first time I'm ever talking about the project in public, and I want to thank Carrie for the opportunity. Again, this is the first time I'm talking about this project, and I'm going to send you a press release about it so you can put it out on Save the Frogs whenever we show everybody the project, and we're going to have a website and all that. So these are some of the species that we photographed in the last 2 expeditions. So this is Aparasphenonon pomba. It's also a casque-headed frog. It's critically endangered. It's only known from a single locality in Minas Gerais that is not under federal protection. It's a private land. And these are some of the pictures we took of this animal. This is one of the most beautiful amphibians in Brazil by far. I'm still not decided if I think this one is more beautiful or the yellow one that I showed earlier, but it's either this or that one. I'm probably going to make a contest on Facebook and see what people say. So we have close-ups, we have portraits, we're doing everything we can. We have some videos. I'm not going to show any of the videos now because it was not going to work anyway. This is another species that we photographed, Bocarmanoila vulcani. It's also critically endangered, also known from a single region, which is Poços de Caldas in Minas Gerais. This is a very touristy area, so a lot of the forest is being cleared and for development of the cities and agriculture and stuff like that. But the frog survives there, and here are some photos of these species as well. Some of these photos were taken in the field. Some of them were taken in a studio setting. And this is one of the things that I want to show with this project. So if you look at this picture and you see the three tall buildings right in the middle of it, and that very small strip of forest in there. So there's a small creek that runs through there. And that's where that population that I just showed you the photos is from. So this species is still surviving inside the city, but we don't know for how long. So the population is getting smaller and more fragmented, and it's still there. It is critically endangered. It's still fairly common in the city, but we've looked for it outside of the city, and there are very, very few records and not far away from the city. So I think this species is in a pretty rough situation as well. And this is Xenoila truncata. This is a famous frog. If looking through textbooks, this is the only known case of frog that eats fruits regularly. So fruits are a big part of the diet of this frog, and we don't understand its biology very much, but it's also endangered with extinction. It's only found in coastal Brazil in the state of Rio de Janeiro. So it's only found inside bromeliads in the ground. These are some of the photos that I took in the last trip. This is the habitat. It's a very fragile environment for many reasons. It's sandy soil, so the soil is not very rich. So if we destroy the habitat, it doesn't regrow as fast as others. And if you take out the bromeliads, it takes a long time for them to regrow. It's on the coast, so it's very valuable for development. Everybody wants to live near the beach. And pollution is a big thing. So this was taken where this species is. This is the habitat full of plastic and dirt and all that stuff. And this is a small strip of forest. So if you see the sandy soil there, this is where we found one of the populations of this species. And you can see it's a small strip. Everything on one side and the other has been deforested for houses. These are big houses, summer houses, where people don't even go there, to just go there for the summer and spend 30 days a year. But we're still clearing out forests and killing very beautiful, unique frog to have those sorts of privilege. And this one is Physalemmus soaresi. It's endemic also from Rio de Janeiro. It's known from only 2 localities. This was a very controversial species in Brazil because there was a big road that was going to cut through its habitat, and the government wanted to do it, and the biologists fought against it. So they had to redraw the plans, and it cost them a lot of money and more time, but the species was preserved. Still, the road did not pass right through there. They had to make a little detour, so the species is still there. So one of the ideas of this project is just get these pictures and show these beautiful animals that are critically endangered to everybody. And this is going to be the project website. If you go there now, it is already online, but don't expect it to be fully functioning. There are a lot of areas where we still have passwords. It all will be available February 12th, I think. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Carrie, for the opportunity. And I'll take any questions. And I'm here available at my email and Instagram, Facebook. I have my website. You can send a message through there too. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. And this is what I do. This is who I am. I do frog biology, and I'm a photographer, amateur photographer, I think, still.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Dr. Pedro Peloso, coming to us live from the Amazon, northeastern Brazil in Belém. Fabulous photos. Thank you for all your efforts, and congratulations on all your successes. And I hope your new project and the unveiling of it February 12th goes well. So we have a couple questions. One is related to the new species that get identified, and the question was, are there conservation projects that get set up to protect those species?
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It really depends on the species, and it really depends on how close it is to universities. So one of the things with threatened species is that usually they're threatened if they're closer to cities and development and stuff like that. So if that happens, they're usually close to universities. So the first example that I showed, that tiny frog, there are a lot of people looking for it in other sites. We're trying to study its reproductive biology and habitat use and preferences. So there are studies like this going on with that species. But for many of them, especially in Amazonia, either they're already inside a park, or it's very hard to implement any conservation strategy to newly discovered species. Because one of the things with newly discovered species that they immediately go through the data deficient category. And once they're there, it's really hard to take them out. It's really hard to evaluate species when you have one or two data points. And in Amazonia, that's usually what we have. I don't know if I answered the question, but hopefully, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, let's see. We have, I'm going to go ahead and take Margot's now, because Margot has to leave shortly. So,
okay.
The first question, will this be available online to see again? Yes, if the recording comes out, which theoretically it should. As you all hopefully know, there's now two main Save the Frogs websites. There's the SaveTheFrogs.com, which just got a huge overhaul in the last month or two. And then there's the Save the Frogs membership site, which all of you should have a login for. If you don't, let me know. The Save the Frogs membership site will definitely hold the video here. We will, as we have these ideally monthly webinars with guest presenters, we will record them and then add them up to a section in the membership site, which also has 140 pages of downloadable PDFs that you would definitely find useful. Margot, you may have seen some of them, but there's a lot of downloadable PDFs for educators, especially educators of kids. So go have a look for that. If you can't find it, let me know. And let's see, next question. Kids are growing up thinking that the planet is going to hell, and we want to give them hope. How? Do you have anything to say about that, Pedro? How do we ensure that kids are optimistic about the future of the planet?
Well, I think the first thing is show kids the planet. If they're in front of the TV all the time and just seeing animals through National Geographic and Animal Planet, they're not going to care much because they change the channel and they're on Cartoon Network or the video game. So I think the first thing is use our parks. It's interesting because I did a lot of bird watching and frog watching in the US. And what I saw was older generations, like a few of you that are there, and myself in the parks, but the younger generation, like 30s and below, and kids, they're not using the parks as much. It's funny, but we don't go out as much with our kids to show them animals. And even here in Belém, we have some parks, and we usually stay near where the playground area is, where the popcorn is, where the common monkeys are. But there are sloths everywhere there. People don't see them. There are snakes. People don't see them because they're not paying attention. So I think you have to bring our youngs out and stop with them, leave the cell phones at home and stop with them and pay attention and show the details. Everything now is happening too fast, and we go to the park with our cell phones, and you see a bird and you go to the app immediately to try to identify it. Just I would say just take your time and enjoy the time with your kids, and enjoy it. Stay there for the whole morning with a single species of bird, trying to listen to the calls, see what it's doing. And we have to enjoy nature again. If we don't, we're not going to care about it.
All right, thank you. Okay, Margot, you have Pedro's email showing up here, so maybe send him an email related to New York. Also, I'll let you know, Margot, if you can certainly go check out the Cornell University website, because they definitely have some amphibian programs going on there.
Yeah.
All right, now your next question: will the World Summit, Save the Frogs World Summit, be available online? I'm not sure if you're referring to the World Summit that took place in April, or the one coming up in Calcutta in a couple of weeks. The one from April is completely online in the membership site, about 12 hours worth of videos. Calcutta, we theoretically will have filmmakers there trying to film the whole thing, and if we get the film, it'll definitely go up online. Okay, so next question is related to your photography setup. So the first question is, what camera, primary lens, and lighting do you use to photograph the frogs?
So right now I use a Nikon D810 with a 105 macro lens and the regular speed lights from Nikon. But I've used all sorts of equipment. I started out with the Fuji that had no interchangeable lenses, and some of the earlier photos I took in that. So I think one of the most important things is to try to understand how light works and how the animal behaves. If it's a very fast moving animal, you're going to need more light and stuff like that. I use a lot of different light settings. So in the studio, I usually use LED lamps to get a lot more light, so I get better quality images with the camera. But I use Nikon equipment. I've been using Nikon equipment for about a decade now. I can shoot me an email and I'll give you like more details. And if you want to go to the Instagram account and you like some pictures, you can direct message me some of those, and I'll let you know what I used as far as configurations, ISO, f-stop, and all that stuff. Because every image is different from the other.
Pedro, if you ever want to prepare like a 1 or 2 page, quick tips for the amphibian photographer, then Save the Frogs could help distribute that, and we can put on your websites and all that info on.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know a lot
of
people would probably be interested to know that. Yeah, because
probably. Yeah, some people have been bothering me to give photography course here for a while, for years, and I just can't find time to do it. I had to cancel on you on the last World Summit because I didn't have any time. I'm moving a lot. I always move. Yeah. Whenever I think I'm set up and my schedule's already, and then I'm moving again, and then everything goes crazy.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, one of our other questions was about photography tours. And so if you ever do get something like that happening, or if you ever want to do something with Save the Frogs, as we lead eco tours, of
Yeah.
which photography are not the primary focus, but a big part of it, then definitely.
Yeah, there's one of the guys listening to us right now, Pablo Sequeira. I shared the link with him so he could see this, and he organizes bird tours mainly here in the Amazonian area. But he's been bothering me to do some amphibian tours as well. And if we can coordinate something, that would be great. I think he'll be glad to join us, and I'll be happy to show some of the frogs around as well.
Yeah, it's a good mix because the birds are out during the day and the frogs
Yeah,
are out during the night, generally speaking. So
yeah.
get it all in there. Okay. Let's see. Well, we got some comments that your talk has been very helpful and inspiring. Beautiful work. You have my dream job. So, everyone liked the presentation. I did too. Thank you so much. Anyone, if you have some final questions, and again, yes, the video, assuming the recording comes out, we'll put it up on the Save the Frogs membership site. Maybe I'll even send out a direct link to it, and that'll link you straight into whatever membership site page it has. So all of you can take a look around the membership site because there is a lot in there, and there will be a lot more added to it. Anyone have some final questions, or Pedro, if you have any final things to say, then feel free.
Yeah, so thank you very very much again for the opportunity. Thanks everybody that showed up and stayed for the talk. I'm glad you liked the pictures. It's very hard to select which pictures to show and which ones are left out of the talk. Uh, I'm glad you liked it, and we need to save animals and we need to save the planet. The thing I want to do is inspire you, inspire everybody, keep inspiring myself to keep up the work. It's as I said, it's a dream job. I think it's actually a dream come true to me. I wanted to be a biologist and travel the world photographing and seeing animals, and I'm able to do that. It's a lot of hard work too. I see a lot of ugly stuff out there. So pristine places I've been when I was a kid, I go back there and there's nothing left there, and stuff like that. But it's part of the job, and I feel it's my duty now to share with you what I see. The nice things, the good photos, the cool frogs, the cool animals, but also the what we're doing to them. So I try to inspire new generations of researchers and conservationists and stuff like that, but also inspire everybody to rethink the way we deal with the planet and with ourselves as well.
I think we have one question coming our way that's going to be in Spanish.
I can
So,
translate that. I'm seeing it.
well, I
That's
mean, I
fine.
can't too. I'm just, we're waiting for it. And while we wait, I thought of something too, because in your
Uh-huh.
bio, you mention museum collections, and I know you've worked in the museums. And I remember being in Colombia on a Save the Frogs presentation tour in 2013, and hearing that in Colombia, there had probably been a few 100,000 frogs taken out of the wild for use in museum collections. And I know that Brazil probably has even more than that. And so, what are your thoughts on the continuing removal of frogs for museum collections? And is that on the increase or the decrease? And just any thoughts related to museum collections?
Yes, so a little bit about my background. I've been working with amphibian, mostly systematics, which is like the study of diversity and naming species and stuff like that. So I've been working with museums for over 10 years, almost 15 years. Museums are a big part of what I do. A lot of the new species I've discovered, I've only seen in museums. I've never collected them in the wild. I would say about a third of the species I've discovered looking through old collections. So with that said, I think collection for museums are still very, very, very much important. But we don't need to collect a lot of stuff from places that are already well sampled. So if I go to so these two expeditions I did for Rio Grande do Sul, we only collected like stuff that we know is very important that we do not have material in museums, or it's a new species that we discovered through genetics and stuff like that. But if I go to a place in Amazonia and I travel for 3-4 days and we're there and nobody's been there before, and then we collect a lot because a lot of the information there is new. So as an example, I was in a field trip in 2010 to the middle of the Amazonia. We were 3 days traveling in a boat and we stayed there for a whole month. And nobody has ever studied that area before. So we discovered 4 new species. Nobody has ever seen them before in a single pond in that area. So we needed to collect that. And I'm still naming some of those species. So the yellow frog that I showed, we collected on that trip. So if I had not collected that frog, we could not have named the species, because we cannot look at the fine details of characters from photographs, and we need to do genetic studies, so we need a small sample of tissue and stuff like that. So collecting is still very important, but I do think that some people collect unnecessary material still. But it's an ongoing debate, even like in professional meetings. There are long fights about this. But I do think collection is still a major part of what we do, and it's very, very important for conservation.
Okay, thanks. So our question from Raynel in Colombia is, what's the best way to photograph dendrobatid frogs who tend to be on the ground, which I assume brings up some different issues.
Dendrobatids are not very easy to photograph. Even though they're colorful and stuff like that, they're not very easy to photograph. So the first thing, you have to get them to a position where you get good contrast between the animal and the background. So if you have a brown frog and you have a brown leaf, that's not gonna work. So you get a brown frog on a black leaf. You get a yellow frog on a black leaf. You get a black frog on a yellow leaf. So you get better contrast. Lighting is going to be very important, understanding your equipment, because many of these animals, so with wildlife, what we need to do usually is focus on the eyes. So the eyes need to be in focus, and the more like looking into the photographer the animal is, the more captivating the photo is. Dendrobatids are a problem because their eyes are black, and they usually, the area around the eye is black. So you get a whole black thing without contrast with the eye. So you have to try to get rid of that. Usually you use more lighting to do that, but then you overexpose the rest of the frog. So I do a lot of diffuse light. So I try to put light into the eye and then diffuse the rest of the light. It's hard to photograph dendrobatids, but I would say the most important thing is get good contrast between the animal and the background. That's the first step.
Thanks. Here's the final question, and then we'll wrap up. So this comes from Godwin in Nigeria. Godwin, Save the Frogs scholarship recipient, Save the Frogs Day event organizer, and amphibian biologist. What was your greatest challenge when you started amphibian photography? So getting started, do you remember any particular challenges?
When we're young and starting out, we're very naive. So I think I have more challenges now than I used to have before. Because when I was young, I was just photographing everything, and everything looked great. And you show it to your mom, and she says, "Oh, this is amazing." And then I look at my old pictures; they're all awful. And now I worry about diffusing light and getting the animal in the right position, and have patience to do that stuff. I think the greatest challenge when I started was getting money to buy equipment and going out to the field, because I didn't have any money to neither of those. But then you get a camera, study the equipment, and then try to get the max you can out of the equipment before you move up and spend more money. Because equipment is not all that matters. I know a lot of people that have great equipment and they can't photograph very well because they don't have the patience. They just want to go there and do what I was doing when I started out. Just take a picture and move on. That's not going to turn out to be a good picture. You have to have patience, especially in the field. So in studio settings, it's easier, you can control light, but in the field, you need to work with natural lighting. So if there's sun coming right towards the animal, wait like 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then a shadow will come and then it'll diffuse the light a little bit better. So I think it was not a challenge, but what I would say to my younger self is have a little bit more patience and stay with the animal a little longer, understand what he's doing, what's the movement, is he jumping towards you or from you, and if you understand those sort of stuff, the photos will get better with time.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to wrap
So
up right there. Yeah.
Rhinel is sending me another question. You can email
Okay.
me and I'll answer you those questions because it's related to gear. Just email me and
Yeah.
I'll answer everything related
Everyone
to that.
has Pedro's email. And again, yeah, Pedro, if you ever want to create a little list of photography tips of any kind,
I'll try. I
we're happy
can't
to.
promise, but I'll try.
Put it on your list for February 12th of 2020.
Yeah.
The big
Yeah.
unveiling. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks for your support of Save the Frogs. We will have another one of these within a month. And that's it. Enjoy your day or night or afternoon, wherever you are. I am Save the Frogs founder, Dr. Carrie Krieger. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.